So we're in our final countdown. Our final study and speaker this evening is Debbie Gordon from Kids Media Center, which is a research center based at Centennial College, and it functions as a think tank and a research center focused on issues related to children and the media in Canada. Debbie oversees research for the center, including market research of children's entertainment properties, as well as applied and social science research that explores children's media futures. She's going to share with us an ethical framework that they developed that articulates best practices in marketing and monetizing digital content for children. And it's obviously important work for a number of reasons, which I don't think I even need to recite for you. So I won't. Over to Debbie.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And our thanks as well to OMDC for the generous funding of this project. It was, I think it's fair to say it was easier to give birth than it was to give birth to this, this particular document, in part because a lot of the legislation around children's content changed midstream for us, so it required us to kind of go back and revisit, but all for the better. So, sure we're doing this right here. Just quick highlights from our project. The reality check for this ethical framework really came from a lot of the innovation that was happening in the children's marketplace. So much new content, cross-platform content that's come in the children's space in the last few years, really with the innovation of iPads and tablets and children curating all their own content through video, like YouTube, Vimeo, etc. So we've just seen so much innovation, and a lot of it actually coming from children themselves as well. But the reality that we found, and really the genesis of this project were a couple of faculty members at our college, at Centennial College, who were working with interactive digital content creators, and just finding that a lot of them were, 18 years old or 12 years old, and they were creating content for children, and didn't always understand the full range of ethical considerations that need to go into content development for children. So we had a fairly broad mandate, and one of those mandates was to ensure that these content creators understood privacy and the framework of privacy considerations that exist around children. And there are, there's in Canada PIPEDA, the Privacy Act, which does not have a specific section for children, but applies to all consumers of digital content. And then in the United States, there's something called COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which wields quite an amount of influence here in Canada, because if you create content and it happens to flow into the United States, then you are accountable to the FTC, Federal Trade Commission in the US. So the reality check for a lot of these developers is if they're creating content for children, they need to understand privacy risks for children, and they need to understand privacy legislation. We know that a lot of children are navigating the digital space on their own. As much as we'd like to think parents are over their shoulder looking at their clicks and their swipes, we know that that's not definitely not the case. And lots of kids are making good choices around their downloads and their uploads and sharing, and we know that lots of kids are oversharing as well and don't necessarily understand their rights. We know that a lot of parents don't necessarily understand the rights that their children have, certainly vis-a-vis privacy. So it was important for us to help developers understand that children are often in this space on their own without the support of parents. A lot of these kids don't have the digital and life literacy skills that understand, or that come with understanding this space and what happens if you are passing along content and if you're sharing personal information. The fact that our personal information is digital gold. So a lot of that, some of those realizations start happening the more digital literacy we expose kids to. But you know, under the age of 13, a lot of children are just more or less navigating and finding their own way, and there can be some serious consequences. And we've certainly lived through a couple of years of all sorts of headline stories around cyberbullying. So there are consequences, and we wanted developers to be thinking digital, television, etc., to be thinking about what those consequences are. And we thought that if you are an ethical marketer, you appreciate that it is not just the responsibility of parents to manage their children's swipes and clicks. It is a shared responsibility of the industry as well. I mean, we all want to make a difference in children's lives and make sure that children are having safe experiences in these spaces. So that was a big motivation for us. So in the research that we did, we wanted to talk to developers who are able to market and launch products that have been successful and who have been successful monetizing their properties as well. So we looked at about 40 different properties in total coming out of Ontario, mostly out of Ontario, some a little bit further afield in Canada. And then we went out and we interviewed 12 of those developers, long-form interviews, so lots of primary research, but a lot of really drilling down case study reviews of various sites that have been created for children. So we spent a lot of time taking a look at how they manage privacy. We're looking at the content, is it age appropriate? We're looking at the respect level that's built in, how they treat the gatekeeper parents. I know if I do work with children on the research side, what are children looking for as they try to identify a site that's good for them? So we wanted to just make sure that we were talking to developers who were going that extra mile so that they could share some of their learning and their experiences. So in the end, what we wanted to do was develop a list of best practices and an ethical framework so that developers who are thinking about parents, what are parents' various needs in this category? You can see some websites, for example, that have no acknowledgement and no recognition of parents at all, and others who put privacy and put children's safety completely into the hands of parents. So there might be a dashboard, for example, for parents. Parents can control the kind of chat that their children have on the site. There are digital citizenship expectations that parents can walk their children through. So there's a whole gamut and a whole range of different approaches that a developer can take. And again, a lot of that will often come down to their ethics, the kind of time and investment they want to put into an experience for children. So we wanted to give them that toolkit that we thought was so important. And then we wanted to strengthen Ontario's position as a centre of excellence as well. We thought that was really, really important. We want to be offering some good examples of how to do it right. So as I said, we used a case study approach. We really drilled down on a lot of different sites. 23 case studies in total. Some of the companies you can see there, video on demand. We had lots of apps that we looked at, some websites, a whole range of different experiences. Most of these we're looking at products range in age from about 2 years of age, which is essentially the age at which we say media is okay, content makes sense for children. So for example, some of the content that we saw on some of the public broadcaster sites would start 2-3 years of age. So we wanted to take a look at the various approaches that companies are using as they develop content. We did lots of interviews with those content creators, as I mentioned, to see what kind of user experience they're developing, what is the educational benefits, or what are the educational benefits for children that have been built into the experience, and we wanted to know how they are monetizing these various projects and products. And then finally, we spoke to the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. We went down to the US and we met with some safe harbor organizations whose job it is to make sure that companies are COPPA compliant and are following legislation and the law. We met with a number of broadcasters as well, just to get their perspective, because often it's up to the broadcaster if a company creates an app and then it's hosted on a broadcaster site. What are they doing to keep children safe as well, and some best practices there. What we did was, we've got case studies, we have a whole series of best practices, and we created something that we branded the PICS Index, and that's an ethical framework that allows developers of children's content to think about parent engagement and various levels tools that they can build into their experience, privacy, user experience, marketing, monetization. And I do believe that would lead to the closing remarks for Raina. So good.